This is the second session of a tutorial on trapping wild pigs. My name is Myron Tingey. This session will cover types of traps and will conclude with a suggestion on an economical way to get started and gradually upgrade a trap. There are two common types of traps for capturing wild pigs: box traps and corral traps. Box traps are typically self-contained. In other words, there's everything that you need right in the trap. All you add is bait and set it. They're typically pig activated with the gate closure. They're usually much smaller than corral traps and typically capture fewer and smaller pigs because the adult pigs often do not like to go in confined spaces. They usually have a top and often a bottom. Corral traps may be much larger, maybe 40 times larger in floor space than a box trap. The corral walls may be rigid or flexible. They may be framed or unframed. They're often 5 to 6 feet tall. They may have a discrete gate or no conventional gate. Trapping function may be pig initiated or remotely controlled. Corral traps usually do not have a top or a bottom. This is an example of a box trap. I built this trap and many like it over a period of a decade. It fits in the back of a pickup truck, 4 feet wide, 8 feet long, and 3 feet tall. These traps are heavy, but they can be loaded and placed by one person. I'm past 70 years old and had to handle these to make them, so I know it can be done. A trigger cable can be adjusted for height and aggressiveness. Adjusting for height allows the trap to be set to capture pigs of different sizes. If you don't want to catch the smallest ones or don't want it to trigger it, then you set it at a higher height. And by aggressiveness, it depends on the placement of the trigger cable so that you can set it, for example, to allow more pigs to get in the trap before they bump into the cable and trigger it. The latch can be adjusted for sensitivity to make it like a hair trigger or a stiff trigger. Horse panels are welded to the frame on 4 sides. There is no bottom on this trap. This is a picture of a trap that was hung on a tree by a pig. It very, very seldom happens. Typically what happens is that the pigs will push the trap with their nose, but they very, very seldom get out. I preferred to not have a bottom because pigs don't like to walk on the metal on the bottom, and I felt like I captured more pigs with no bottom than I did with putting a bottom on, and it reduced the cost. If you're planning on buying or building box traps, I have some suggestions. One is that you avoid cattle panels on the trap sides. They'll allow the small pigs to get out, and they're not as strong as as utility panels, or even better, they're not nearly as strong as horse panels. I would avoid traps that are with the panels welded to the outside of the frame, because if they're welded on the outside, when the pigs push against them, then they're pushing against the welds, whereas if the panels are mounted inside the frame, then the welds simply just have to hold the panels in place, and the pushing of the pigs does not really stress the welds. Avoid traps with horizontal rods outside the vertical rods. This has to do with the welding as well. It's just better to have the horizontal rods on the panel grid on the inside. Corral traps have cylindrical walls, and they're typically 4 to 6 feet tall. The material for the cylinder walls may be rigid or flexible. Large diameter corrals may be the most effective. Pigs seem to not like to be in confined spaces, so the larger the corral, the more comfortable they may tend to be, and it would be easier to get them in the trap and get them eating freely and ready to be trapped. Large diameter corrals accommodate more pigs. Interesting thing is that you can double the diameter and that increases the floor area 4 times. In other words, for twice the cost, you get 4 times the size. I believe that a 30 to 40 foot diameter is the practical maximum for corral traps. I will briefly discuss 2 unique kind of corral traps. First is the pig brig. It's a commercially available flexible wall trap. It does not have a discrete gate. The pigs enter by sliding under loose netting. The corrals are constructed with netting and T-posts. Exit is prevented by the pigs standing on the loose netting as they try to push out. Prices start at $2,500 according to the Pig Brig website. The advantages are that there are no moving mechanical parts. And there's a nice feature about these that's in common with the next trap I'll discuss, and that is if you roll up the netting for training purposes, the pigs can see all the way through, which gives them a sense that they're not entering a confined space. The disadvantages that I see are that if you want to check the trap status, because there's no provided monitoring process, you either have to go to the trap or you have to buy separate remote video monitoring. Loading pigs in a trailer is not as convenient, apparently, as gated traps. I've seen videos on YouTube where people try to show how to do that. These traps may not be as handy in Texas and places where you can load pigs to sell, but if you're going to just shoot them or dispatch them in the trap, I think it would work well. The other thing that I really don't have a feel for is long-term durability. The manufacturer offers a 1-year warranty, but I wonder if, since they're made out of some kind of a fabric, if they're going to last as long as steel traps. I don't know. The next unique trap that I'll discuss briefly is called the Bore Buster. It's a rigid, commercially available, suspended cylinder trap. It's made in a round cylinder which is elevated and then dropped by remote control when pigs are inside. The cylinder is elevated with a hand crank winch. At the website, I could not see the dimensions, but I estimate that the trap is about a little more than 4.5 feet tall and about 17 feet in diameter. The cost is over $9,000 according to a website called farmranchstore.com. The advantages I see of this particular trap is that it's very convenient. It's an integrated package, and for people that don't want to mess with do-it-yourself, it's one-stop shopping. It seems to me that the pigs, since they can see through the elevated trap, they would be more comfortable and would enter more readily. The disadvantages that I see are the cost. This is the most expensive any trap that I've ever seen. And another disadvantage from my perspective is that it's rather short, 4'7", which is not much taller than a cattle panel. And it's small in diameter, and because of the diameter and because of the nature of the trap, there is a probability of the trap striking pigs when it is dropped. I did see one video about that happening. I don't know how often it happens, but it does seem like a possibility. Conventional corral traps have rigid cylinder walls there. These walls are typically made with panels of steel rod. These steel rod grills may be framed or unframed. The commercially available ones are nearly always framed. Trap entrances may be gated or they could be gateless. The advantages of these traps, and the simplest ones, are very inexpensive to make relative to the cost of other traps. Price range that I've seen is $200 to $4,000. These traps are effective and efficient, and they can be easily upgraded as finances permit if you start with the lower end traps. There aren't many disadvantages. I couldn't think of any relative to the other kinds of traps. But one thing that could be confusing is the wide variety of price ranges, the wide variety of features, and the variety of gates that are offered on these traps. I have used both framed and unframed panels to make conventional corrals. I believe there's a place for both of them. The unframed panels have the advantage of being significantly less expensive than the framed ones, but they also have the disadvantage that they require considerably more effort and time to erect. With unframed panels, you have to put in T-posts, typically 4 or 5 T-posts for every panel. So it ends up being a lot of T-posts. You have to drive them in the ground, and then you have to attach the panels to the T-posts. So it does take time. The primary use, in my opinion, for corrals made with unframed panels are those corrals that will stay in one place for quite a period of time. It would be a situation where you wait for the pigs to come to the corral. And if this is the case, then the reduced cost is a real advantage. On the other hand, if you're going to take your corral to the pigs to catch more pigs, a framed panel corral makes more sense. They are more expensive, but they're much quicker to install, and they require no T-posts. They're attached together with pins that slide through sleeves, so they're quicker to erect. So that's their advantage, but the disadvantage is that they cost more. However, if you're catching a lot of pigs, and in Texas if you're selling them, or other places where you're getting paid to dispatch pigs, then the extra cost for framed panels may be well justified. I'll now offer a suggestion for starting small and gradually upgrading. This is for people that want to get started with the least amount of money and are willing to do the work themselves. So my suggestion is that you start off with 4 cattle panels and about 20 T-posts. You configure the corral in a gateless figure 6 style. Support the panels with T-posts driven into the ground every 4 feet. It's important to orient the panels with the horizontal rods inside the vertical rods. The panels are stronger this way, more impervious to damage by pigs. It's also important to secure the panels inside of the T-posts so that when the pigs hit the panels as trying to escape, they're driving the panels into the T-posts and not having to test the strength of your wire connections. You can use twisted wire or U-bolts to connect. U-bolts are far more expensive, but they're stronger and reusable. as you're putting the panels together, you should overlap adjacent panels by 8 inches, which is one vertical rod, and secure them together. So this basic setup will work. You can catch pigs this way. The disadvantage is that because we're using cattle panels, the smaller pigs can escape through the large grids, and it's not unheard of for the larger pigs to go over the top, and they can damage it. There's another feature, and that is that with the large grids, when pigs run and charge at the fence trying to escape when they initially get trapped, or when the trapper comes up, if their nose happens to go through a grid instead of hitting the wire, their head can act like a wedge. It can bend the rods and actually break the welds, and they can actually destroy the panels that way. So that's one of the disadvantages of cattle panels. So they got the 3 disadvantages. They break easier, the little pigs get out, and the big pigs go over the top. But you'll still catch pigs. Second step, as you want to gradually upgrade, is to add more panels. I wouldn't recommend more than 8. I think that gives you a 40-foot diameter, 30 to 40 feet diameter, which is adequate. The next step then, as you want to upgrade, is to add a drop gate with what I call a knee latch and a pipe feeder trigger. Those will be talked about later. And then if you want to upgrade further to eliminate the disadvantages of the cattle panels, you can convert to hybrid panels. And the way you do that is to get a horse panel, a 5-foot by 16-foot horse panel, and split it lengthwise, so you end up with 2 pieces, 2.5 feet by 16 feet. You secure the horse panel to the bottom of the cattle panel. You can do this by welding or wiring them together. Overlap 6 inches. You overlap the horse panel 6 inches over the bottom of the cattle panel and wire it together, and then you have a panel that's 6 feet 2 inches tall. Now the advantage of this hybrid panel is that it's got small grid at the bottom, so the 2x4 grid for the horse panel, so the little pigs can't get out. The overlap of 6 inches makes the panel extremely strong and impervious to damage by charging pigs. And then the height is such that virtually no pigs will go over the top of a 6'2" fence. It is possible. I've heard of it happening, but it's extremely rare. The next step would be to add a camera for remote monitoring. This will require cell phone service, either direct or, like with a mobile hotspot, you have Wi-Fi, and it also requires electrical power, which could be a simple battery or like a deep cell battery and a solar charger with a charge controller. Next step would be to add a remote control gate latch, which has the same requirements as the camera. And then if you want to upgrade further, you can cut the hybrid panels in half and frame them with steel tubing. So they end up with a panel that's 8 feet long and a little over 6 feet high.